So I've now spent 200 hours in Warframe, and yeah, this game is a masterpiece. I never expected it to give me this much value over so much time, and I've come to the conclusion that this is gaming's best kept secret. Not in the sense that the game is unpopular, because, well, it isn't, but unless you actually try the game, and if you're looking in from the outside, you have no idea just how much value and content an 11-year-old free-to-play game can provide you with, and how many surprises lie behind that login screen. I was one of those people, before I played the game, I didn't really expect that much, but after trying the game and sinking a lot of hours into it, but then again, 200 hours isn't a lot in Warframe terms, I'm still in the tutorial copium, I realised I couldn't have been more wrong. This is the third video in a series where I'm documenting my experience playing Warframe. In my previous video, I spoke about my experience after 100 hours, now sitting at around 200 hours. Once again, there's a lot to talk about. Warframe for me, in my first 70 to 80 hours, felt like it was a game I was playing just because it was fun, and not because it had great meaning, neither story-wise or gameplay-wise. I was just playing it because it was fun and addicting. The combat and movement mechanics, those were aspects of the game that jumped out to me pretty much right from the start. Being able to blast through hundreds of enemies within seconds, speed running through missions, and obviously the mandatory falling off the map every 2 seconds are things that just never get boring to me. As I said, the combat and movement are definitely the first aspects of the game that jumped out to me right away and provided me with a lot of fun, which obviously they still do. But there are so many more pieces to the puzzle that make me want to get on this game and play over and over again. And I know that is the same for a lot of other people that play the game. Now, in my case, one of the big factors as to why I keep playing is variety. The variety of content, the variety of mechanics, the variety of storytelling twists. The amount of times it feels like I'm playing a completely different game is something that I've never experienced before. There are just so many things to do in Warframe, and not only that, you can get on the game and choose what you want to do, choose where you want to go, choose what weapons, what frames you want to use. The game just gives you complete freedom, throws you in, and lets you do what you want to do. Are you tired of using that Warframe? Oh, that's fine. Just go use another. Completely change how you're actually playing the game. You're tired of using that weapon? That's fine. Go use another. Go grind for one of the hundreds of weapons in the game. Are you tired of actually playing as your Warframe? That's fine. Go fly through space in your Arkwing or your Railjack. Those are just a couple of the scenarios that can go through your head while you're playing Warframe. There are so many times I find myself sat in my orbiter, not knowing what to do or where to go, just because there are so many different options. The variety is actually insane, and I think that's what keeps me coming back for more, and also a lot of other players. I mean, there's a reason why there are so many players that have thousands upon thousands of hours and they still play pretty much every day. And for me, that's because if you give players variety makes it hard to get bored. The more hours I put in, I find myself focusing more on mechanics that I overlooked at the start of my Warframe journey. For example, optimizing builds, whether that be frames or weapons, to try and get the best out of them. It's something that I've only really just started paying attention to, because at the start of the game, let's be honest, builds really don't matter. You can put on any random mods and you can get through the majority of the content. But the more you progress through the game, you're going to start to feel underleveled, feeling like you can't kill those enemies, which in turn makes you take a step back and take a look at your builds. I was putting the exact same mods on everything with the mindset that, well, if this mod's good, it should be good on everything, but that is far from the truth. Honestly, optimizing builds and mods is something that I can spend hours upon in itself, just trying to get right. And there has been multiple scenarios where I've had to experiment and try and get the build right so the frame actually works the way that I want it to. For example, my favourite frame up to yet is Gorse, and with Gorse I really had no problem killing enemies and just nuking the entire map, but something that I was struggling with was energy. So I swapped some mods, put energy mods on for energy regeneration, max energy, energy consumption, and lo and behold, energy was no longer a problem. And to be honest, I have no idea how the number 3 on my keyboard hasn't worn out yet, because yeah, I kind of spam the number 3 as Gorse. And the reason why I now look at my builds is because I've had the chance to use multiple different frames and weapons. In the last video, I was only really able to use Gorse and Vault, maybe a couple of others, but I now have access to frames like Wukong, Mag, Excalibur, Zephyr, and that's just to name a few. And after using more than just 2 frames, who are both primarily about speed, I've come to realise just how much your playstyle can differ depending on what frame you're using. And then when it comes to weapons, I've used almost 40 different weapons, which are the exact same as frames. They're all so different and so unique in their own way, and all take different builds to get the most out of them. By the way, Ignis Wraith may now be my favourite primary weapon in the game. Zooming through missions, blasting a flamethrower that can also activate other status effects and not just heat, and just melt through crowds of enemies is something that just activates the dopamine receptors in my brain. If you've watched the previous videos, you probably know me by now. Dopamine equals fun. And I've also got around to completing my first Kuva Lich, which is something that when I first learned about confused me majorly. I kind of crashed out and didn't play the game for 4 days because I was that confused. I just couldn't wrap my head around what it actually was. But after some research and some help from some experienced players, I was able to complete the Lich and gain access to a Kuva weapon, which, by the way, my first Kuva weapon is actually awful, as I didn't know you could actually check to see what weapon you were going to get. So I saw the button to mercy kill the enemy to get the Kuva Lich started and pressed it instead of waiting for a good weapon. I blame my ADHD. I also finally got around to using the Railjack, to be completely honest. I'm probably going to upset some people here. It's probably the first mechanic in the game that I'm just not a fan of personally. The whole idea and the visuals are absolutely insane, but the actual mechanics, piloting and using the turrets, just something that feels a little janky to me. I don't know what it is, and I'm just not the biggest fan. Hopefully it's one of the aspects of the game that can grow on me over time, but as of right now, just not the biggest fan. And another thing I now focus on a lot more as opposed to when I first started was standing and syndicates to gain access to unique mods, weapons and cosmetics. It's something that I now put a lot of time into. I mean, unlocking and using different items is one of the best parts about Warframe. I can get more cosmetics to sit in my orbiter for 6 hours on end, customizing. Yes, please. Going to the different open world areas and gaining access to new weapons and cosmetics that I can spend hours on customizing. Something that I'm obviously not going to pass up. And I now take full advantage of these systems and do them pretty much every time I play the game. Speaking of customization, I don't even want to know how many hours I've now spent in my orbiter customizing how my frames look. Creating different themes in my head for each frame and changing their appearance is something that once again has gained my attention later on rather than at the start. Now, customization is one of those things you can't really do that much at the start because you don't have plat, you don't have cosmetics, you don't have colour palettes. But now, after making some plat, after gaining access to customization and colour palettes in various ways, also gifts from a lot of you guys, which I appreciate so much, I can now see why people call this game Fashion Frame instead of Warframe, and to be honest, I'm kind of leaning towards that. Even customizing the landing craft in the loading screen and the UI, making the menus look how you want them to look, it gives the game a real personal feeling and it lets people express themselves, which is something that I think is a massive positive in the game. These are just a few different aspects of the game that have caught my attention later on rather than at the beginning of my journey. There are obviously a lot more aspects to the game that have leapt out to me at this point in time, but if I spoke about all of those, the video would be 12 hours long. After 200 hours, it's even more obvious to me now that the game takes a long time to actually make sense of everything you discover, unlock, and a lot of the time to understand what you're actually doing. Admittedly, I'm still clueless a lot of the time and often forget a lot of things just because of the sheer amount of content and information that the game comes with. I'm still having new things thrown at me practically every time I get on and play, and that's props to Digital Extremes. It shows how creative they are to come up with this many different systems that constantly change how the game is played and how the game feels. And this happens gradually over time rather than you being given everything straight away. New things are introduced to you along the way, and that's ultimately the main reason why I keep coming back for more, just to see what surprise is coming next. It's a game that needs you to spend time on to truly see the value that this game comes with. So many games give you everything that is to discover really quickly, but Warframe, that is not the case. You start to see the value the more time you put in, which can be a good and a bad thing. Some players may never get to the point of realising just how good the game is because of the amount of time that's needed to be put in to see the true value. As I said in my previous video, the second dream quest is what changed my whole outlook on Warframe from a story point of view, but I feel it was a massive turning point and gave me a different outlook on Warframe as a whole. Personally, I reached the second dream at around 80 hours, and from what I've heard, a lot of other people say that this is the moment that hooks them to the game. And for a huge hook like that to be 80 hours into the game, some people may never get to that point of being shown why Warframe is so special. And the reason why a lot of people may not get to that point is because they have the same complaints that I did when I first started the game. And the massive problems at the start of the game for me were the time gates. And they can seem really off-putting at the beginning for new players, but I can say that the more you play, they become way less of an issue. I no longer have any problems waiting for items to craft because of the sheer amount of weapons and frames you can gather over time. You always have items to level up and use while you're waiting for those items to craft in your foundry. I also had a massive complaint about the MR cooldown, and this is actually pretty funny because right now it is literally not a problem at all because I'd probably level up my MR maybe once a week, and that's if I'm lucky. So for any new players out there, trust me when I say this, MR cooldown literally becomes non-existent. It's not a problem at all. Those were my two biggest complaints at the start of my journey, and I think that would be the case for a lot of other players. Now, even though they're not really a problem to me anymore, I do still stand by my opinion. Should time gates be in the game? No. But after putting this much time in, I've learned that going through that struggle at the beginning was so worth it for what comes in the future. Speaking of progress, I've also made some progress in terms of quests, even though I get sidetracked every 2 minutes just because of how much there is to do in the game. I still have completed some quests. Kind of. First of all, the War Within. Unfortunately, the footage that I have of this quest corrupted, so I have no footage to show. I apologise. Something I'm pretty mad about because this is actually one of my favourite quests that I've completed so far. It was a quest that forces you to play as the operator pretty much the whole time, which I thought was a great way to introduce me to the operator mechanics like void slinging, void mode and transference. A lot of the quests seem to be pretty puzzle based, and obviously you need to complete them yourself. Doesn't tell you how to do them. Come on, we're playing Warframe. As a lot of you may know, I enjoy just blasting through missions and just completing them as quick as possible. But to be honest, the puzzles are actually a really nice change of pace. Then after the War Within, I moved on to the Sacrifice, a main quest which came with another huge shock in terms of story and was one of the biggest shocks that I've seen in the game yet. I don't want to say too much because I'd hate to ruin that organic experience for someone who may not have reached the Sacrifice yet. And the quest also grants you access to a brand new frame called Excalibur Umbra, which obviously you get to use in the quest itself, but you also get to keep it after you've completed the quest so you can go and use it in different missions. And the frame also comes with some Umbra mod slots and Umbra mods, and these Umbra mods are basically regular mods but a little more juiced up. And he's also instantly max level, which I'm pretty sure gives you XP towards your MR. Don't hold me to that because I didn't actually check, but I'm pretty sure it does give you the XP towards your mastery rank. So yeah, free XP for MR. Can't complain. Now, this quest had a lot of cinematics and a lot of cutscenes, a lot of pauses, but who cares? They all looked unbelievable. It's Warframe at the end of the day. I don't expect anything else anymore. The visuals in this game are just that good. And finally, I was able to complete my favourite quest that I've played in Warframe so far. That quest is Chains of Harrow. This quest is one that I'd been looking forward to after hearing so much about it. I was met with a dark atmosphere and it felt like I was playing a horror game. Oh my God, Jesus Christ. That made me jump. That long corridor is hot. What was that? I'm getting scared in Warframe. What is this? That long corridor is horrifying. Oh, I can see him. Going from flying through missions and quests to having to walk around a completely abandoned ship, seeing bodies on the floor and messages on the wall written in blood. It was a completely different experience to what Warframe normally gives you. I didn't think Warframe could keep changing the experience that much. Like, I've already experienced everything that I thought I could experience, but oh boy, did they change it up for this quest. The atmosphere, the voice acting, the visuals, and to be honest, how brave the devs are to experiment with so many different ideas. This quest just blew me away. Going from the bright and colourful atmosphere of the rest of the game to a dark and eerie setting, something that makes the Chains of Harrow one of the best quests that I've completed in Warframe. To be honest, one of the best quests I've completed in any game ever. I appreciate the devs so much for giving us this quest and for being brave and trying different ideas, because 9 times out of 10, these ideas that they try, they execute perfectly. And it makes for some unforgettable gaming moments, not just for me, but for a lot of other people. That sums Warframe up. Unforgettable moments. This game provides you with so many of those. So many complete twists when it comes to storytelling. Some of the most fun gameplay mechanics I've ever experienced. In-depth systems that all have their own use and reasons to use them. The visuals and cinematics, especially in quests, are better than a lot of AAA games. I mean, to be honest, Warframe does a lot of things better than AAA games do nowadays. This just shows how brave the developers are to implement so many different components into one game, especially a free-to-play game. And they're not just good ideas, but they're executedly unbelievably well. After 200 hours of playing, and I still get blown away pretty much every time I get on the game. That is something that is very surprising, because after 200 hours in most games, you've either completed the game or you've discovered everything there is to discover. In Warframe, I feel like I've just barely scratched the surface. I just can't believe that this game isn't bigger in terms of player base. Why are more people not talking about this? In my opinion, it deserves to be the most played free-to-play live service game on the market. From being a game that is just, well, incredible, to game developers that actually care about their product and their audience, which, by the way, is exceedingly rare to find in the gaming space. I just feel that the game deserves much more recognition for how good it is. It's fair to say that Warframe is now one of my favourite games of all time, and it's going to be something that I play well into the future and continuing my journey with. I just wanted to say I appreciate the support on these videos so much, and I'm so glad you guys are enjoying watching, and I'd love to carry on doing it into the future after some more game time. If that sounds like something that interests you, like the video, subscribe, comment down below, let me know what your favourite thing about Warframe is. I also sometimes stream Warframe over on my Twitch, so once again, if that's something that interests you, the link will be down below and you can catch me over there. With that being said, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.